Andrea checked her watch, a frown on her face. Only 2 volunteers had showed up. She worried that her appeal to her social media followers had gone unheeded. "Don't worry," her friend Liz said. "You told everyone to come at 2 p.m., and there's still 15 minutes left." "You're right," Andrea said. She walked around the room making sure all the supplies were in place. She felt a tap on her shoulder. "Are you Andrea?" a girl behind her asked. When Andrea confirmed, the teenager broke out into a smile. "We met online. I'm Sasha." "Sasha," Andrea said, recognizing the name. "I'm so glad you can make it." "Anything to help out the homeless," the girl said, her tone cheerful. She pulled a man to her side. "This is my brother Charles, and he's here to make posters too. We definitely can use the extra help," Andrea said. She turned to face the man, but when their gazes connected, the smile froze on her lips, and she felt the air getting sucked from her lungs. It was almost as if he had jumped out of a GQ magazine and landed inside her dingy nonprofit organization. Still, something about him bothered her. At first glance, Charles seemed almost too sure of himself. In a way, he reminded her of the frat boys from college. From what she recalled, those men were rich, entitled, and represented everything she hated in society. But Andrea shook off her unkind thoughts. Charles was a volunteer, she reminded herself. Everyone was here to help get the homeless off the streets. And to accomplish that, they needed to prepare powerful signage for the upcoming protests. By 2 p.m., 4 more volunteers arrived. "Let's get started," Liz announced to the group. Andrea and Liz handed out the poster papers and markers. She explained to the volunteers that with winter coming, the homeless were especially vulnerable. "Hopefully our bold and colorful posters will attract the attention of people who care," she said. Andrea settled down next to Charles and started to work on her poster. Although she tried to ignore it, she was well aware of his every movement. But he chatted to everyone at the table, and she slowly began to relax. Charles looked over at her. "How did you come to start the charity?" he asked. "I grew up poor and was kicked out of my parents' house when I was 16, Andrea said. She explained that she was homeless for a while before a kind couple took her in and helped fund her education. She wanted to do something impactful, so she created the charity to advocate for the homeless and poor. Someone has to do it, since the ultra-rich are too selfish to care about the poor, she added. Charles raised a questioning brow. "That's a pretty harsh view," he said. "It's just the truth," Andrea said passionately. "Society would be better off if the wealthy didn't exist." The other volunteers murmured their agreement. After a moment, the discussion focused on how they would help reduce the homelessness in the city. "I wish we could buy those pre-built temporary homes," Andrea said wistfully. "We could get so many people off the streets with those." But having the rallies was the first step to bringing attention to their cause. Over the next few weeks, she led several more demonstrations, and each rally brought more people. Fortunately, her core volunteers, including Charles and his sister, came to all the protests and lent their support. As time went on, Andrea became more and more impressed with Charles. She found him down to earth, kind, and always helpful. He had natural leadership skills, and the volunteers deferred to him whenever they had a problem. On more than one occasion, Andrea caught herself thinking about him. At the next rally, he stood next to her, and on impulse, she turned to him. "Do you want to go out with me sometime?" she asked. She held her breath. She rarely made the first move, but she could no longer ignore the sizzling chemistry between them. "Sure, I'd love to go out with you," he said. After that, they began to see each other regularly. Andrea had dated in the past, but she never experienced such connection with someone. They had long phone discussions, and Charles seemed to understand her. And when they kissed for the first time, she felt as if she floated in the clouds for days afterwards. At their 1-month anniversary, they decided to check out a new restaurant in town. As she discussed her ideas with him, a man appeared at their table. "Mr. Benson," he said, reaching out to shake Charles's hand. "How are you, sir?" As the men spoke, Andrea looked from one man to the other, her brows furrowed. She was certain the stranger was the newscaster from the national news channel, and the name Benson had a familiar ring to it. The visitor left their table. "Benson," she said slowly, as she pieced the information together. "You're not affiliated with the Benson Group, are you?" The question made Charles uncomfortable. "I am," he confirmed. "I own it." Her heart sank, and she sat back in her chair. "You never told me you own a multinational media company." He started to speak. "Wait," she said, holding out her palm. Anger suddenly filled her body. "I don't need to hear any more lies." Andrea got up and hailed a taxi home. She was such a fool. She had fallen for Charles, but his persona was a lie. He lulled her into thinking that he was an ordinary person like herself, but he enjoyed a more entitled and privileged life. After he spent time with her, he likely went back to his friends and laughed at her expense. Over the next few days, Charles attempted to contact her, but she wanted nothing to do with him. Eventually, he stopped calling, but Andrea was too busy to notice. Winter had arrived, and at last count, 2 homeless men she knew had frozen to death overnight. Andrea fought back her tears. She was certain that there would be more deaths in the future. In the meantime, with the lack of funds, the best she could do was organize a winter clothing drive and distribute those items to the needy. When Andrea returned to the office from one of her runs, Liz took her aside. "Take a look at this," she said, showing her a personal check of $500,000 from Charles. There were half a dozen other checks too that showed generous amounts. "And that's not all," Liz continued. She handed Andrea a newspaper. On the front page was an article that touted her charity. Charles had offered his public support and appealed for his peers to help get people off the streets. Maybe Andrea needed to reassess her judgment of wealthy people, she thought. Certainly she had misjudged Charles. She believed a billionaire like him would never care about the poor, but she remembered that he devoted many hours at the rallies, and now during a critical time of need, he stepped up and donated a generous amount to her organization. With the money they received, they would now be able to buy dozens of prefabricated homes and prevent more needless deaths on the streets. Andrea picked up her phone and started to call him, but in the last moment, she decided to visit him. She found his workplace and entered the opulent building. "I'd like to see Mr. Benson, please," she said to the receptionist. "Do you have an appointment?" the woman asked. Andrea was trying to think of a good response when a movement caught the corner of her eye. She turned and saw Charles entering the office building. He stopped, and his eyes immediately locked with hers. She approached him. "The check you sent will help a lot of people," she said. "Thank you." He nodded. "I tried to tell you about the donation, but I couldn't get through to you." She winced. "I was wrong about you, Charles, and I'm sorry. You should have told me about your background." "I usually don't like to talk about my affairs," he said. He explained that people got strange when they learned about his wealth, and this is why he avoided the topic. Andrea felt heat rise to her cheeks. She knew her reaction to his status was much worse than the norm. "Do you think you can forgive me?" she asked. "Of course," he said without hesitation. "I really admire you, Andrea. I want to see you again." "I admire you too," she said, relieved. "But can we agree to have no more secrets between us?" "Agreed," he said. And to prove it, they sealed their deal with a kiss. What did you guys think of the story? Please comment in the comment section below. I can't wait to read your answers and discussions. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to like and subscribe to get the latest stories to warm your heart. Until next time, bye.